It gives me pleasure to be with you today. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the president of your university and also Professor Xi Zefing for inviting me. They are giving me the opportunity to share some remarks with you. I thank them very much. My contribution will cover 5 points: the context as an introduction, then the impact of the COVID-19 on education, in particular in primary and secondary education, because this is the point in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa in particular. Then I will move to the response of the ministries of education, and I will give my suggestions on post-COVID-19. Then I will conclude and also give some remarks. Before I start, allow me to introduce myself. I come from Guinea, which is in West Africa. I am H.E.Aicha Bah Diallo. Bah is my father's last name, and Diallo is my husband's last name. I am married. I have a daughter who is a lawyer and practicing in Guinea. I also have a granddaughter who just finished her undergraduate school, and she is ready to join Dauphine, which is the best university in France, for her master's degree. Well, when they tell me, how do you introduce yourself? Well, I'll always say, I am a lifelong learner. This is what I have done all my life. Learning at home as a child, then primary and secondary in Labé and Conakry, which is the capital of my country. And then I went to the US for my undergraduate. And my major was chemistry. And to promote science among young girls in Guinea, I have been requested to teach in high schools because they wanted girls to go into science and technology. Therefore, I have taught for 13 years in high school before becoming the headmistress of a high school. Then I joined the Ministry of Women and Social Affairs as Director of Project and International Cooperation. 2 years later, I was appointed Chief of Staff. They call it in Guinea, Chef de Cabinet. I was the first to have that title. And 2 years later, I moved to the Ministry of Education as Minister of Education. And for 7 years, I was in charge for this department. I will not shy away to let you know that people like me very much. In fact, many schools, private as well as public, are named after me. And when you ask girls, well, what would you like to become when you will grow up? They will say, we would like to be like H.E.Aicha Bah. And when I left government, I joined UNESCO as Director of Basic Education. Then I moved to Deputy Assistant Director General. And at the end of the day, I was the Assistant Director General of UNESCO. Then I retired. 9 years later, however, the Director General of UNESCO requested me to stay and be his special advisor for Africa until he retired. This is what I did. Now I'm free, but I have never been as busy as now. I'm chairing NGOs. I'm a member of others and members of boards. I enjoy my life. As they say, the mind, it's a muscle. If you don't use it, you lose it. Now that you know who I am, they called me, in fact, failed retiree. Let me go back to our topic. And as I told you, the 5 points, the first will be the context, which is my introduction. As you all know, Africa has all kinds of resources, mineral, hydraulic, touristic, and so on. However, its most important resource is its youth. It's the youngest continent in the world. It is estimated that by 2050, 50% of the population will be young. This could be a blessing if the continent invests in education and training to develop the potential of its youth. As study indicates, 93% of youth believe they need to update their current education and skills. And the African Union, the Charter of the African Union, indicates that youth are its biggest resources. You know, the Africa's population has grown steadily from 1950 to date, and current predictions estimate that this population will continue to expand, reaching 4.3 billion in 2100. In fact, they say that one child out of 3 which will be born in the world will be from Africa. Now, the population in Africa is 1.3 billion, with striking differences in countries' population size. Among its 54 countries, 8 have populations larger than 50 million. 17 have population larger than 5 million. So you have big and small countries. And among the 48 least developed countries, called LDCs, 33 come from Africa. Even, despite all the resources I told you, 33 least developed countries are in Africa. The speed and reach of COVID-19 crisis has been tremendous. Most African countries have now confined cases. The total number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in Africa are 404,786 as of 1st of July. And this is the total of active, recovered, and death cases. If you look at these numbers, it is really relatively low compared to other regions of the world. Unfortunately, the capacity of African countries to address healthcare challenges remain hindered by lack of data and weak statistic capacity. This does not facilitate the development of policies, their implementation, and their evaluations. However, Africa has comparative advantages. The first, it is said that the youngest continent, as I told you, is Africa, with a median age of 20. And only 3% of the population in sub-Saharan Africa is older than 65. And lessons learned from other parts of the world indicate that older people have a significant higher risk of contracting severe symptoms than younger people. Most of the time they have diabetes or they have high blood pressure, and so on. The second advantage is the climate. All our countries almost are hot countries, warm. It's 28 degrees Celsius or even 30. In Niger and Mali in the north, it's 40 degrees. It's really very hot. It is believed that COVID-19 does not resist hot weather. However, this assumption has to be confirmed. The disadvantages now of African countries. In 2019, 43% of its population lived in urban areas. The high population mobility across borders facilitate the spread of contagious diseases. You know, families sometimes live in cross borders, so you cannot prevent them from crossing the border. And this is not going to help. Cities also pose a challenge to this disease's control due to reduced opportunities for social distancing, often poor hygiene and sanitation, making it difficult to implement regulations such as hand washing and sanitation. You know, running water, it's very difficult to have it in many cities in Africa. Sometimes you have a pump, but there is no water. Another issue is the fragile health system with limited hospitals and health care facilities. COVID-19 has not only stretched public health systems beyond limits, but also caused unprecedented economic, social, and humanitarian damages across the continent. So we say you have three crises. You have health, social, economic, and now it is the food crisis. And the speed with which countries can detect, report, and respond to outbreaks can be a reflection for their wider institutional capacity. It is a reality test for public governance and leadership. Only 43 countries can test COVID-19, and only 10 countries provide free and universal health care. COVID-19 is a wake-up call for improving Africa's still weak health structures and related institutional capacity, such as education, which is our subject. It also highlights the need for strengthening data and statistical capacity, in particular in relation to health and education. Now, let's have a look at the impact of COVID-19 on education systems. It has marked an education crisis. Since March 2020, African countries decided the closure of public and private schools and also learning institutions. This is a response to the global response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And we know that around the world, 91% of enrolled children across 129 countries have been impacted, including Africa. And the number of children out of school during that period, it's estimated to be 1.6 billion learners. African countries then realized that they have neglected to invest in health and education. They were not ready to respond to this pandemic. School closure, we know, is going to have devastating effects to the most vulnerable and marginalized kids, in particular women and girls. You know, it's really women and girls who have problems in having access to education, staying in schools, and succeeding. That's why I'm always going to talk about women and girls. I will always emphasize that part. You know, this closure will have a short and long-term effects on education systems. And if schools remain closed for a long time, the danger is that children will not only miss opportunities for learning, but also the one day a meal they receive in schools. You know, that's what we call canteen. At least they have one day, and poor kids can eat. And so if it is closed, then the hunger will be there. Well, they also might be victims of child labor. For girls, the consequences are most devastating because they will be subject to early and forced marriages. Therefore, early pregnancies. It means that they will not come back to school. It is important to support vulnerable citizens at a critical time. As I said before, food is now a big problem in Africa. You know, marginalized population, poor populations, they are really out of food. So some countries are distributing food relief packages to poor and vulnerable households. And indeed, students are benefiting. These people are in dire need of special care, protection, and support due to severely limited resources and sustainable livelihood, social exclusion, poverty, and inequality, such as physical disabled, deaf and dumb, blind, elderly, widows, and orphans. COVID-19 has revealed the inequalities in the education systems. Now, let's have a look at the responses of departments of education. What can be done to improve access and quality of education for the most marginalized and to prevent inequalities from widening further and affect the provision of education indefinitely? Here, African countries have a big challenge. It's to limit the spread of the virus while preserving educational continuity. What they did was to adopt new strategies to meet this challenge. They turned to alternative forms of education. Students and teachers are not physically present in classrooms. This is really new in Africa for primary and secondary. Well, African countries, therefore, adopted a multi-approach strategies, including the use of radio and television broadcast, printed resources, and digital platforms to ensure that pupils will continue learning. Therefore, African students have to learn from home using distant education through television, radio, computers, tablets, smartphones, and paper-based media. Now, when we look at the public television, ministries of education are using public television channel to provide education. Lessons are prepared, filmed, and broadcasted during the time negotiated with the television channel. But the big problem is here is to reach out to all students at the same time, and also access to electricity, which is given in many countries every 6 hours. And even so in some, it's every 2 days. Another problem is that not all families have television. And when these lessons are broadcasted, the kids are not, most of them, they are not there. They are doing other things. Like girls, they are either cooking or washing dishes or washing clothes. If we move to the computers, tablet, and smartphones, well, these technological devices are used to delivering online learning. They can be used also for accessing digital platforms as well as radio platforms. But only 60% of African citizens have access to internet. And 89% of learners do not have computers at home. So you see, it's another big issue. However, when radio, fortunately, let me just look at the information as far as either the numbers. So 80% of households have a working radio. This is the most widespread audio medium in sub-Saharan Africa and accessible to the greatest number of people, teachers, students, parents. Therefore, it has the advantage of reaching all stakeholders involved in education. When you look at all these devices which I have given, you will see that the online alternatives to learning are not accessible to children in rural and urban areas, and also to vulnerable people, and like the girls, as I said, the people in rural areas, the poor people. They do not have electricity. They do not have access to the technical devices, and internet connection are not available for them. And yet, we know that it is important that every student, be it a girl or a boy, a male or a female, they all have the right to education, the continuation of this education. Therefore, they have to have access to internet and also continue their education. For the moment, as I told you earlier, there is no monitoring and evaluation because no data. It is too new. And we have to bear in mind that if this closure of schools remain too long with parents who are not literate most of the time, we are going to have a big problem when school will resume. Already, they suffer from the social isolation, affecting their social emotional skills. They are anxious, in particular girls, about their current situation and what is going to be their future. It is predictable that many children will drop out, and the majority is going to be girls, of course. Another issue is the cancellation of examinations, which is going to be a negative, it will give a negative effect, a negative impact, especially on girls who need to finish their primary and secondary before their parents think of withdrawing them to marry them. They are afraid of unwanted pregnancies. It's a shame when a girl is pregnant without being married. Worst, some countries have declared that the year 2020 is going to be a blind year, a white year. Parents are really devastated. Now, let me turn to my suggestions for COVID, because I don't know what the countries have decided to do. But my suggestion would be the following. COVID-19 has brought to light the inequalities within African societies. While countries are managing the virus, they should think of the post-COVID and develop strategies to simultaneously dismantle the structural systemic barriers which reinforce inequalities. Therefore, COVID-19 is an opportunity. It is an opportunity to rethink, to reimagine, and to redesign African education into a vibrant, equitable, and resilient system that can withstand any future crisis. You know that COVID is not going to go now. It might stay some time. Some people are even saying that it might only finish at the end of 2021. But we have to have women and girls, vulnerable children and youth at the core of the response and beyond. An intentional focus on women and girls for the future is essential part of breaking structural practices which have marginalized them so far. A system for collecting and disaggregating data need to be put in place to ensure that the impact of the crisis on women and girls, on vulnerable children and youth, is informing the redesign of the education system into a fully inclusive and equitable system. It is very important to strengthen statistical capacity on the continent as a fundamental tool for ensuring accurate policies and effective public service delivery that leaves no one behind. COVID-19 has shown that the education system has to adopt and use the new technologies for learning. Therefore, it is paramount that countries create and support the enabling environment of ICT infrastructure to maximize impact and increase learning efficiency so that all students, rural and urban, male and female, can access interactive platforms and then learn. This will bridge the inequality divide and narrow gender-based education gaps. Special attention has to be given to the education offering, as well as the conditions of geographical coverage and the technical devices students have. And also to take into account the age of the learner. Most of the time, you know, when they prepare these lessons, they don't think of the age of the child. In fact, kindergarten kids were not taken care of during the COVID. I mean, they are not part of the process. It is terrible because kids, in fact, they need it, and it's in their right. These platforms can be used to train and to retrain teachers on virtual curriculum to ensure that all students, male and female, have access to quality education. Teachers, when provided with the technical tools and access to internet, will share online teaching resources, exchange ideas, tools, methods, suggestions, and also their frustration, their anxiety. And now, what about the students who are not being able to follow the lessons? Then technologies will be used to record and share lessons with them. Ministries of education will have to negotiate with internet service providers to obtain an internet package for free, if not at the best price, to facilitate the distance education for all. And also ensure that there will be light, there will be electricity in the homes of the children. This is what is important, and that they will have access to technological tools also. But we know that this is not going to be now, and tomorrow either. Therefore, despite the digitalization, which will not be in general, will not generalize in a short time, it will be important to provide students with textbooks in order to facilitate distance learning and guarantee that content is standardized with curriculum. It is important to involve parents, to identify those who cannot help their children. And then, when school will resume, organize make-up lessons for these children, because they should not lose. In all countries, ministries of education will also have to commit to protect students, teachers, school administrators, and appoint and train focal persons in schools to ensure compliance with the COVID-19 protocols. You know, when you ask our people to wash their hands, it's a problem. When you ask them to put a mask, it's another problem. So these people will be there to ensure that it will be followed. For all approaches used, it is important to evaluate methods used and draw lessons for the future. And already ministers of education are meeting in online meetings with the support of the African Union. They meet, they share, they discuss, and they would like for the future to use both face-to-face and online courses. However, they have to ensure that all learners will have technological tools needed, access to electricity and internet. All stakeholders should contribute to national information and awareness raising campaigns and help fight misinformation and sometimes fake news. Here, education has a key role to play to convey the messages. For instance, hand washing, the importance of hand washing and putting the mask. However, now I can say that hope is allowed because 60 million young Africans, around 13.4% of the total labor force of 15-24-year-old, are currently facing unemployment. All they request is to help them upgrade their skills. 91% of youth aspire to start business in their own country instead of trying to cross, the sea and die in the sea trying to come to Europe. They want to create a better and more just world. Therefore, nurturing such talents means that Africa should invest in both ad hoc training, and real life experiences. Now, as for conclusion, COVID-19 as which will have a huge social and economic impact on the entire African continent. Already, it is estimated that the pandemic will hit economic growth for an expected 3.2% down to 1.8%. It will hit hard and long and will worsen fragilities. On the continent, in particular in sub-Saharan Africa, the pandemic will widen inequalities, restrict employment and investment prospects, and potentially fuel additional domestic unrest and conflicts. Already we have a lot of conflicts in Africa, you know it. And we don't know more, we don't need more. Therefore, immediate action has to be taken, but it has to be in a coordinated way with the implication of the private sector, civil society organizations, multilateral actors and partners. Sound and coordinated governance is needed at national, regional, across the continent. The AU has a role to play. The African Union, it will only be solved with collective and coordinated effort. We must address together, and at the same time, and the sooner the better, the need to share scientific knowledge and expertise, the need to ensure the relevant humanitarian supply for the most marginalized communities. And we need to deploy a massive economic stimulus package, beginning with immediate debt relief for African countries. You know, the call for Africa says, and I quote, only a global victory that includes Africa can bring this pandemic to an end. If all the others are able to succeed in combating the COVID, if Africa is not part of it, well, it will not be a successful endeavor. Now, I have some remarks, which are the following. Among the philanthropists and business leaders to pledge money to support African countries, you have Alibaba, the co-founder of Jack Ma. In fact, the plane he sent to Guinea, they told me that Chinese are here to help us. He pledged to donate over 1 million testing kits, 6 million masks, and 60,000 protective suits and face shields. And as you know, Chinese universities are contributing to training African human resources in domains needed in Africa. One of my students, in fact, was trained as a medical doctor in China. He is one of our best doctors. And you know, in his house, all his children speak their native language and Chinese. They have never been to China, but they all speak Chinese. And I asked, I said, Dean, how come? He said, well, you know, I would like them to learn Chinese. Maybe one day they will go to study, but at least one day, if you want to have an employment, if you don't speak Chinese, you are out. And I think this is right. It's the most spoken language in the world. It's a beautiful one. Well, you know the number of African students in China. In 2018, they were 81,562. And this represents 16.57% of the total number of international students in China. We know also that some Africans are visiting China for business, and you know it too. There were about 2 million Chinese living and working in Africa. Therefore, for me, China and Africa are partners forever. And this is going to be a success for both China and Africa. And I will be looking forward to visiting your university one day. I've been to China several times, but this time it will be visiting your university. And it's really a pleasure to give you some of my remarks. And always remember that H.E.Aicha Bah Diallo is a lifelong learner. Thank you so much.